When the doctor told him he had less than 3 months to live, Miguel didn't cry. He only asked one question. "Can I still drive my cab a little longer?" It was a Tuesday afternoon in Los Angeles, the kind of day when the sunlight feels heavier than usual. Inside the oncology ward of St. Mary's Medical Center, a man in his 40s sat quietly, hands folded, while the word terminal echoed in his ears like a verdict. Miguel Alvarez had been driving a yellow cab across the streets of L.A. for nearly 20 years. He'd seen the best and worst of the city: movie stars, lost souls, drunks, and dreamers. But nothing prepared him for the moment the doctor said, "Stage 4 lung cancer. I'm sorry, Mr. Alvarez. It's spread to your liver." In that moment, everything went silent. Not even the humming of the machines in the room could reach him. Miguel was the kind of man you'd never notice twice on the street, ordinary face, always wearing a faded Dodgers cap, with eyes that smiled even when his body was tired. He'd left Mexico when he was 19, chasing the promise of a better life. By 42, he was still working double shifts, driving through downtown LAX and East LA, anywhere he could find a fare. His wife, Rosa, stayed home caring for their 3 kids: Lucia, 10, Diego, 8, and Marisol, 4. He was always smiling, Rosa recalls in her interview, her hands trembling as she shows a picture of their family taken before the diagnosis. He never complained, even when he came home coughing so hard he could barely breathe. The first signs appeared in late summer. Miguel thought it was just the smog, the kind that sticks to your lungs after long days behind the wheel. But when the coughing turned bloody, Rosa insisted he see a doctor. 2 weeks later came the scan. The shadow on his right lung wasn't small. It wasn't even operable. Dr. Patel, the oncologist, explains it on camera. The cancer was advanced. We offered chemotherapy, but the chances of remission were extremely low. What surprised us was his attitude. He didn't ask about the statistics. He asked how long he had to prepare his family. Miguel's world shrank overnight, from the wide streets of Los Angeles to a single hospital room. But even there, hope had strange ways of entering. One evening, as the nurses changed shifts, a chaplain named Father John Morales walked in. He carried a small blue booklet, a Novena to the Blessed Virgin Mary for healing. He left it quietly on Miguel's bedside table and said only one thing: "She never abandons those who call on her with faith." Miguel wasn't a man of many prayers. He went to church occasionally, mostly at Christmas or for baptisms. But that night, when his wife and children came to visit, his youngest daughter, Marisol, pointed to the image on the cover, the Virgin Mary in white and blue robes, and asked, "Is that the lady who helps sick people, Papa?" He didn't answer, but when they left and the ward lights dimmed, Miguel opened the booklet. He began reading, whispering words that felt both foreign and familiar. "O most holy Virgin Mary, Mother of God, I come to you in my weakness." That was the first night of his novena. For the next 9 days, Miguel's hospital room became something else. Not a place of despair, but a quiet chapel of whispered prayers. Every morning before the sun rose, Rosa would bring a small candle, one she bought at the parish gift shop, and place it by the window. The nurses allowed it, as long as it stayed unlit. She'd sit beside his bed and read from the booklet Father John had given them. "O Virgin of Miracles, I place before you my suffering, trusting not in my strength, but in your mercy." Those words became their routine. Day after day, their voices blended with the sounds of monitors and distant intercoms. On the 3rd day, something strange happened. Miguel told Rosa he'd dreamt of walking down a long road lined with white roses. At the end of that road stood a woman in blue light. She didn't speak, but she smiled and placed her hand on his chest. When he woke, the pain in his lungs had lessened. Just a little, but enough to notice. He looked more peaceful, Rosa remembers. He even joked with the nurse. He said, "Maybe the lady is fixing me. one petal at a time. The staff thought it was morphine's effect, but Dr. Patel noted something unusual. Miguel's oxygen levels had improved slightly. His fever was gone, and he was breathing easier than before. We couldn't explain it medically, Dr. Patel admits. The medication dosage hadn't changed, yet his readings were improving. On the 5th day, his old friend Carlos, another taxi driver, visited him. Carlos wasn't religious, but when he saw the rosary beads by Miguel's bed, he said quietly, "Man, if anyone deserves a miracle, it's you. You gave rides to half the city for 20 years." Miguel laughed weakly. "Then maybe the other half can pray for me now." That night, the hospital lights flickered during a sudden power dip. In the dim glow from the hallway, Rosa saw Miguel holding the rosary, eyes closed, whispering the Hail Mary over and over. When the power returned, he looked up and said softly, "Did you see that light, Rosa? It wasn't from the hallway. It was warm, like sunlight." She didn't know what to answer, but she took his hand and prayed with him until dawn. By the 7th day, the oncology team ordered a follow-up scan, mostly to monitor tumor progression. No one expected any difference. But when the images came back, the lead technician frowned. "It's still there," she told Dr. Patel, "but smaller, considerably smaller." The mass that had once filled nearly half his right lung had shrunk by almost 30%. Dr. Patel called it an anomaly. Miguel called it an answer. When Rosa heard the news, she broke down in tears. "It's her," she whispered. "The Virgin is helping him." Father John visited that evening. He brought with him a small bottle of holy water from Lourdes. He placed a few drops on Miguel's forehead and said, "Whatever happens next, give thanks, not only for the healing, but for the hope that returned to your heart." Miguel smiled faintly. "Hope is the only medicine I can afford right now, Father." The nurses began noticing something different, too. Patients in the nearby rooms would often ask, "Who's singing?" Because late at night, faint melodies of the Ave Maria seemed to drift through the hallways. But no one ever found the source. One nurse, Emily, swore she heard it near Miguel's room on the 8th night, just before dawn. "It was beautiful," she said later, "like someone humming right beside me. When I checked, Miguel was asleep, holding the rosary against his chest. The monitors were steady, almost musical." By the 9th day, Miguel was strong enough to walk down the corridor with Rosa's help. The candle by the window caught the first morning light, and he whispered the last prayer of the Novena. "O Blessed Mother, I thank you for hearing me, not for curing me completely, but for showing me that I am never alone." He didn't know those words would soon be repeated across television screens and parish bulletins all over California. The doctors couldn't explain it. The scans showed something beyond medicine. But the people who had prayed with him already knew. What happened in that small hospital room was not coincidence, but grace. When word began to spread across the ward that a terminal patient was suddenly improving, curiosity followed. It started small, just nurses whispering during coffee breaks. But by the weekend, someone had told a local parishioner who told her sister at Our Lady of Guadalupe Parish, and by Sunday morning, Father John's homily began with the words, "If you are losing hope, remember this week a man among us has found it again through the Virgin's intercession." Parishioners exchanged looks, some skeptical, some tearful. In a city that rarely paused for faith, stories like this felt like distant echoes from another century. But the next day, Miguel's story reached social media. A nurse posted an anonymous message on Facebook. "A man with stage 4 lung cancer is showing miraculous signs after praying a novena to the Virgin Mary. Please keep him in your prayers." Within hours, hundreds of comments appeared. Some called it fake news. Others began praying along, creating an online novena in solidarity. Meanwhile, at St. Mary's, Miguel's room had become a quiet pilgrimage site. Hospital workers, janitors, receptionists, even a few doctors would pause at his door just to look in. No one spoke much, but they all noticed the same thing: peace. Dr. Patel recalls, "You could feel it. That room didn't feel like the rest of the hospital. Patients came out anxious, exhausted, defeated, but in there it was still, calm." One night around 2 a.m., Nurse Emily entered to check his vitals. She found Miguel sitting up, whispering his rosary. The heart monitor glowed steady green. But what caught her attention wasn't the monitor. It was the light. There was a soft brightness in the room, Emily told the camera, her eyes welling up. Not from the lamps. It looked like moonlight, but warmer. I froze, and then I heard him whisper, "She's here again." The next morning, when she told the staff, they laughed nervously. Hospitals have seen many strange things, but apparitions weren't one of them. Still, Emily couldn't shake what she'd seen. She filed a quiet report to Father John. 2 days later, Father John arrived at the hospital with a small team from the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. They didn't come to prove anything, just to observe. They brought a blessed medal of Our Lady and placed it beside the candle on the windowsill. As they prayed, Miguel opened his eyes, weak but clear. "Father," he said, "when I close my eyes, I see light, and roses falling." "Is that strange?" Rosa began to cry. Father John took her hand. "No, my son, sometimes heaven speaks in the language of flowers." At that same moment outside the window, a light drizzle began to fall, a rare spring rain. Emily, watching from the hallway, gasped as a faint reflection appeared on the glass. A silhouette shaped like the Virgin, hands open, surrounded by a glow. "It lasted maybe 10 seconds, she later said. "Long enough for everyone in the hallway to see it. We all froze. I can't explain what I saw, but I know it wasn't a trick of the light." A maintenance worker snapped a quick photo on his phone. The image spread online within hours, blurred, imperfect, but powerful. Local news outlets picked it up. Miracle at St. Mary's Hospital. Patients claim apparition of Virgin Mary. For Father John, the focus was not on the photo, but on Miguel's condition. That evening, new scans were ordered, and once again the results defied logic. The tumor had shrunk even further, now less than half its original size. "This doesn't happen," Dr. Patel said in a later interview. "Not without treatment. We ran every test. He wasn't on any new medication, and yet his body was healing." Miguel's own explanation was simpler. "It's her. I don't know how or why, but when I pray, I feel warmth in my chest, like someone's fixing me from the inside." Rosa remembers sitting by his bedside that night, unable to sleep. She watched her husband breathe easily for the first time in months. The candle flickered faintly, and in that gentle light she whispered, "Thank you, Mother Mary. Even if you don't cure him completely, you've already given me my husband back." From that night, people started calling it the St. Mary's Light. But for Miguel, it was never about proof. It was about peace. And yet, the biggest test was still to come, when faith and medicine would meet face to face. A week later, the hospital board convened a medical review. Too many people were talking, and the administration needed answers. In a bright conference room on the 3rd floor of St. Mary's, a group of doctors reviewed Miguel's latest scans. On the wall, 2 images were displayed side by side, one from 3 weeks earlier, the other taken just that morning. Dr. Patel pointed at the screen. "You see this area? The tumor mass has reseeded again, nearly 60% reduction. This is clinically impossible without chemotherapy." A younger resident murmured, "Maybe it's a lab error." But the radiologist shook her head. "We double-checked. Same patient, same ID, same machine." No one in the room wanted to use the word miracle. Medicine didn't have space for it. But silence often speaks louder than words. Meanwhile, down the hall, Miguel was being prepped for a cardiac stress test, standard procedure for someone showing such unexpected recovery. Rosa and their children waited outside, clutching the rosary they'd prayed with every night. Father John stood with them quietly. He placed his hand on Rosa's shoulder. "Whatever happens today, remember, faith is not a trade, it's a trust." Inside the room, Miguel lay on the table, electrodes across his chest. He smiled weakly at the nurse. "If I pass this, can I drive again?" she chuckled. "Let's just get through it first." As the machine hummed to life, his heart rate began to climb, steady at first, then irregular. A sudden alarm went off. The nurse's smile vanished. "Doctor, he's crashing! No pulse!" Chaos filled the room. The medical team rushed in, shouting commands. Dr. Patel grabbed the defibrillator. The steady tone of the flatline echoed like a siren through the hallway. Rosa froze when she heard it. The children began to cry. Little Marisol, the youngest, clutched the small blue Novena booklet against her chest and whispered through tears, "Mama, can I pray now?" Rosa nodded, trembling. Marisol knelt on the cold hospital floor and began the only prayer she knew by heart. "Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee." Inside the room, Dr. Patel shouted, "Charging! Clear!" The paddles struck. Nothing. He tried again, still flatline. Then, as Marisol's voice reached the final words, "Pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death," the heart monitor beeped once, then again. A faint rhythm returned, irregular but alive. Dr. Patel froze. His eyes met the nurse's. "We've got a pulse. He's coming back." Miguel gasped sharply, eyes wide open. His first words were almost a whisper. "She was here, holding my hand." The room fell silent. Even the monitors seemed to pause for a second, as if time itself was listening. Outside, Rosa clutched her daughter in disbelief. Father John whispered, "Sometimes heaven waits for the smallest voice to open the gate." That night, after Miguel was stabilized, Dr. Patel visited his room. He wasn't a religious man, but something in his eyes had changed. "You shouldn't have survived that episode," he said softly. "Statistically, there's no explanation. But I saw what I saw." Miguel smiled faintly. "Doctor, statistics don't pray." From that moment, the story of the taxi driver who came back spread across California. But Miguel never sought attention. He just wanted to drive again, to feel the road, to see the sun, and to thank the Virgin who had walked beside him through the valley of shadows. By the following week, Miguel's name was everywhere. Local news stations ran the story under cautious headlines. "Taxi driver's miracle recovery raises questions at St. Mary's Hospital." Reporters gathered outside the main entrance, cameras flashing each time a nurse walked by. Some mocked it. Another social media hoax. Others demanded proof. Rosa refused interviews, but someone leaked the cardiac monitor footage showing Miguel's flatline and his sudden recovery. The clip went viral in a day. "I don't care if it's divine or not," one online comment read. "That man came back from zero heartbeat. That's a story." The hospital issued a careful statement. Patient Miguel A., 42, exhibited spontaneous return of cardiac activity following cardiac arrest. Investigation ongoing. No mention of prayer, no mention of the Virgin. But the world had already connected the dots. At the next Sunday Mass, Father John addressed the crowd. "Faith does not replace medicine, it completes it. When the two meet, we glimpse what mercy looks like." Meanwhile, Dr. Patel found himself caught between science and awe. He agreed to a televised interview, visibly uneasy. "Look, I'm a man of data," he said. "But I've seen hundreds of cardiac arrests, none like this." The moment his daughter prayed, the very second, the heart restarted. That's not coincidence, but I can't explain it either. The clip aired on Channel 5 News and changed the public tone overnight. Skepticism softened into curiosity. Letters began arriving at the hospital, hundreds of them, from strangers offering prayers, novenas, and thank you notes for giving them back their faith. I had lost hope after my husband's diagnosis, one woman wrote. But after watching Miguel's story, I started praying again. Inside the ward, Miguel grew stronger each day. He could walk without oxygen for the first time in months. The nurses began calling him El Milagro Driver, but through it all, he kept silent about one thing, the scent. A faint fragrance of roses that seemed to appear every morning near his bedside, vanishing before anyone else noticed. He didn't mention it. Until the feast of Our Lady of Fatima, May 13th, 2022. The hospital chapel was nearly empty that afternoon. Miguel, still weak but walking, asked permission to attend a short mass with Father John. Rosa wheeled him in quietly, their children following behind. During communion, as the choir sang Ave Maria, a sudden breeze passed through the chapel, though the windows were closed. The air filled with the unmistakable scent of roses, fresh and sweet. The nurses in the back exchanged puzzled looks. One whispered, "Do you smell that?" Father John smiled gently. When heaven visits, it often leaves the perfume of its garden. Later that evening, Dr. Patel came to check Miguel's vitals. When he entered the room, he froze. The same fragrance lingered there, soft, peaceful. He took a deep breath, then said quietly, "You know, Mr. Alvarez, I think I've stopped trying to explain you." Miguel chuckled weakly. "Then maybe it's time to start believing, Doctor." A week later, the final CT scan came back. The cancer was still there, but shrunken to a shadow. The doctors called it a partial remission beyond expectation. Miguel called it mercy. The story aired again, this time under a new headline. Doctors stunned as taxi driver shows unexplained recovery after 9-day prayer to Virgin Mary. Even the skeptical outlets changed tone. Editorials spoke of a reminder of hope in an age of despair. And at St. Mary's, a small plaque was placed outside room 317. Here, in the spring of 2022, a man prayed and found peace. For some, it was just coincidence. For others, a sign that the Virgin still walks among us. But for Miguel, it was simple. He lived not because he beat cancer, but because faith taught him how to live, even when death was near. 6 months later, Los Angeles looked the same as ever, traffic, billboards, sunset smog over the valley. But for Miguel Alvarez, every mile now felt like a gift. He'd been cleared for light work by his doctors. Instead of airport runs or night shifts, he drove short routes around Pasadena and San Gabriel. Sometimes he kept a small statue of the Virgin Mary on his dashboard, a simple plastic one Rosa had bought at a thrift store. Passengers noticed it often. Some asked out of curiosity, others out of faith. Miguel would just smile and say, "She's the reason I'm still driving." One afternoon, a nurse from St. Mary's hailed his cab without realizing who he was. When she recognized him in the rearview mirror, she gasped. "Mr. Alvarez? You're back at work?" He laughed softly. "I guess the Virgin wasn't done with me yet." When he dropped her off, the meter read $7. She handed him a 10 and said, "Keep the change, and keep the faith." That night, Miguel drove home slowly under the streetlights. He rolled down the window, let the cool California air fill the cab, and for a moment he swore he could smell roses again. Dr. Patel visited the Alvarez home a few months later. He had a small gift bag in his hand, a rosary from Lourdes sent by his sister in India. Rosa welcomed him with coffee and homemade pan dulce. Father John happened to drop by as well, and for the first time the doctor and the priest met outside the hospital. "You two were on opposite sides of the same mystery," Rosa said, smiling. Dr. Patel looked at Miguel, then at the rosary on the table. "I used to believe faith was a comfort people created when medicine failed, but after that day, I'm not so sure. Maybe medicine is just one of the ways God works." Father John nodded. "Science studies how life happens. Faith reminds us why it's worth living." They shared a quiet moment of understanding, no debate, no proof needed. Outside, the children laughed in the yard, chasing a red kite against a sky that finally felt clear again. Today, Miguel drives only a few hours a day. He spends most mornings helping at his parish, guiding new immigrants to jobs, delivering groceries to the elderly, sharing his story when asked. He doesn't call it a miracle anymore. He calls it a second chance. I still have cancer, he tells those who ask, but it doesn't have me. Every year on May 13th, the family lights a single candle by the window, the same window where the Virgin's light once appeared. They pray together in Spanish and English, their voices mingling like two languages of one faith. For the people who don't believe yet, Marisol always adds, so they can see what we saw. As the camera pulls back, the street outside fades into sunset. The yellow cab is parked by the curb, its dashboard statue glinting in the light. Voiceover, warm and hopeful. Some miracles don't end when the healing does. They continue in every act of gratitude, every mile of life we're given to drive. If you believe the Virgin still walks among us, share this story and let her light reach someone who needs it today. Thank you for watching Ave Miracles. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe, share, and leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Until next time, may Our Lady's peace be with you.